Welcome to the Jeffrey van Leeuwen podcast, episode 9. Today, I'll be speaking with David Estié, who's from my home country, the Netherlands. In our conversation, we delve into the world of modern shamanism, exploring David's personal journey, his experiences in sweat lodges, and the shamanistic practices he uses to rekindle the connection with the spiritual realm. We'll also discuss the role of psychedelics in modern shamanism practices and how these ancient traditions can help us reconnect with nature and ourselves. Additionally, David shares his personal insights on healing personal and ancestral trauma through modern shamanistic practices and how he believes these practices can lead to personal growth. There's one thing I would like to mention before we get started. Shamanism is a new subject for me that I have very little knowledge about. I tried, therefore, to approach this conversation with genuine curiosity and respect, and to understand the practices and explore their potential benefits. At the same time, I try to employ critical thinking and maintain a healthy dose of skepticism to ensure that our discussion is both meaningful and credible, and it felt like this was the best way to do that. This podcast, therefore, serves as an exploration of modern shamanism, and it aims to uncover and understand the impacts these practices have on people that engage in them. Before we dive in, I want to thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Leaving a comment or review is also a great way to help out. And as we're just getting started, every bit of support truly makes a difference. Thank you. And let's get started. Here is David Estié. All right, David, good seeing you again. I thought that maybe we could start with a small introduction of who you are and what you do in your daily life, and then make the big jump to the big topic of the day, which is shamanism. And shamanism is, aside from bits and pieces I've picked up in other podcasts, largely an unknown area for me. So I'm really looking forward to flesh this topic out with you and get a good understanding of the field. So with that said, I would love you to take me on a path of exploration regarding shamanism. But let's start with the introduction, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. My name is David Estié. I am 37 years old. I am married to my lovely wife, Hannah. I have a son who will turn 2 in December. His name's Jim. I live in the Netherlands. I run a company that produces and sells steel design doors. And since 3-4 years, I've been interested in shamanism, and I have been following courses with a mentor, and it had quite some profound. It has had a profound impact on my life at the moment since I've been working on it.
Okay. So you said you came into contact with a mentor and you did some courses. That was the first introduction to the concept of shamanism.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you reach that point? So what were you looking for?
So I will start with what happened a few years back. I think that's like 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I was not in a very good place, and someone from my work back then, my job back then, said, maybe you should talk to a coach. So I was talking to this coach, and she referenced to me that I should go and talk to this man named Jos Kester, who's also a Dutch man. And since then, I have been in contact with him. I went there for the first time talking about issues I had, mainly issues in my working life, private life, issues I had in my past. But back then, 8 years ago, it was one huge abracadabra. It was kind of hard to understand for me because he was talking about, also a bit about shamanic practices, but I could not make any sense of it. So then I went back to daily life, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I was in his newsletter, and a few years back I received a newsletter that he was making a course called the Shaman Way, and I thought I'd reach out because a year before I had a big experience in a sweat lodge, which turned out to be a common practice in especially Northern American shamanistic practices. So I thought I'd reach out and start this course with him, and well, it made such an impact on me that I asked him, I want to walk this path. This feels so good. Can you be my mentor? That's pretty much how it all started.
Okay. So at the very beginning, you said that you were referred to Jos Koster by a lady, because she thought it was the most appropriate way for you to process whatever it is you needed to process.
Yeah.
What was you can say whatever you want about this, and if I'm asking too much, also please feel free to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
But what was the thing that led to that conclusion that the course that Jos Koster provided was the right step forward?
I think mainly it had to do with her sense of me being quite spiritual. We were talking about ancestors, and my grandfather, my dad, which I had some issues at that time, and she asked me a few things about it, and what I really wanted to do in life, and etc., etc. And I said, what I would really like to do is just to help people and be in service of people, help them with their own issues. And then she blurted out, "Oh, you sound like, quote unquote, a healer. You should go and talk to Jos Koster." I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I'll do that. So I made an appointment with Jos, and yeah, like I mentioned, it was really complex what he said, and it did not really resonate with me because I didn't know what to make of it, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Right. So she was quite spiritual herself, and that's why she made the connection with shamanism. And what was her, if you even know, what was her previous connection with Jos? Were they working together in some shape or form, or were they friends?
I do not know. I have not asked her, but it was 8 years ago, so I can't recall.
Okay. Do you know if there's also some other ways forward that she could have given, or is this like her specialty, getting people connected to people like Jos?
No, I don't think so, because when I went there, she was more like a people's coach, or
Okay.
not,
Mm-hmm.
or a life. Yeah, I would not call it a life coach, but she was just helping people making the next step in their life, or if they had issues, seek out what the root of these issues would be, and
Mm-hmm.
how to make the next step.
Right. Okay. So kind of like a career coach, but also delving into.
Yeah, kind of. I thought it was a bit more personal than a career coach, because a career coach mainly focuses on, what are you doing now in your work, in your job, or what's the next step you can do. Pretty much.
Right. Okay. Okay, so the two things that led you to Jos were your connection with her, and the fact that you said that you wanted to help other people. So you wanted to connect with others and help others through life or through their careers or something like that. And she was like, okay, then Jos is the perfect guy to talk to, because he focuses on helping people through or walk their path rather.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then you came into contact with Jos, and this was before he started the course, the Shaman Way, right?
And yeah, Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. I know he has been doing courses for quite some time, but this was before that time. Yeah.
Right. So he already had a couple of courses that he did.
I think so. Back then, I thought he had a course which is called the um like the basic course. So you get to learn a few basic shamanic practices.
Hmm.
Um, but
Like the
yeah,
essentials.
I mean that was before I really connected with him. So I'm not entirely sure for how long that has been running.
Hmm.
But I know Jos has been doing these practices for like 25 or 30 years, and he was head of the School of Shamanic Practices here in the Netherlands.
Hmm.
And yeah, his knowledge about the subject is quite profound.
Right. Okay. 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 So you came into contact with Jos, and at the beginning you didn't click with him. So what happened from there? When did that started to change, or how did your interaction with him go?
Yeah, so back then, um, I think the click was there, but I could not make anything of what he said because I was probably not there yet myself. So I went there, met him once, and then went my own way, just living normal, regular life, so to say. And a few years back, I did a sweat lodge with a group of guys, like a man's group, and this released like very deep emotions from myself, my ancestors, which is kind of weird to hear. But I could really feel my grandfather's spirit when he came around, and it's his sadness because he lost his son who was very young, and I was crying his tears, so to say. So after that experience, I thought, oh wow, this is what happened to me was I felt was so unbelievable. And then a few weeks after, I received this newsletter from Yost because I was in his database with I'm starting this new course called the Shaman Way and well, etc. And I was like, oh, this is perfect thing for and at the right moment, at the right place, right time. This
Right.
is exactly what I need for the next step. So I started with these courses, which were done in the weekends, and I learned practices, but also helped Jos in assisting him with when he was with other people going through their own process, just helping him out, or with shadow work. Usually, guys are opposite to each other, and you try to, you know, get the shadow out, or yeah, the spirit of anger, pretty much, to get it into the light. But you need to provoke it, and I was the guy who was just provoked the other person, but I was the guy who would, quote unquote, take the beating, which helps the other person in his or her process.
Is this the same experience as what happened in the sweat lodge?
Um, no, it, well, the shadow work for me was more about anger, you know, about the little boy who was not heard in the past, who there was a lot of there was a lot of anger and sadness that came into the light, and filled up the space. But in the sweat lodge, it had more to do with my grandpa and my yeah would have been it would have been my uncle, but I've never met him, as he was in an accident when he was 16.
Could you break that down a little bit? So if I got this right, in the beginning you met Jos Kester. You didn't really connect, but at some point he invited you to take that sweat lodge experience. And that's the moment, if I got this right, it kind of opened your eyes to the experience itself. After which you started taking the course and started entering the shamanistic life. Can you break the sweat lodge down for me, if I got the summary correct?
Yeah, sure. No, yeah, it's pretty much all right. But the first
Mm-hmm.
sweat lodge experience was not with Jos, but with another group
Ah,
of guys I was in. But those are details.
okay.
For the story, it does not really matter. So,
Mm-hmm.
but a sweat lodge, is a, yeah, I would call it a hut made of a willow tree um, branches, and blankets go on top. There's a hole in the middle in which really hot stones will be put when everybody is gathered in the sweat lodge. So in the sweat lodge, there you have the lodge, and in opposite of the lodge, there's a big fire in which the stones are built, and you can give an intention to the stones before you put it into the fire.
So the
And
fire is in the center of the hut, in like the middle, or is it outside the hut?
no, it's outside the hut.
Outside, okay.
Yeah, so the fire is outside the hut. They put
Mm-hmm.
stones into the fire, but also with tobacco and with wood. And there's like this fire keeper who
Mm-hmm.
takes care of the fire when the other participants are in the sweat lodge.
Right, okay.
So when the fire is hot enough, you undress, you go into the sweat lodge, you sit in a circle, and after a few moments, the fire keeper starts bringing stones into the hut.
That came out of that fire.
That came out of that fire, so they're like
Mm-hmm.
red hot, glowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the hut, which in which can be mixed, but it can also be with just men or just women. You sit in a circle, and there are usually 4 rounds of bringing stones into the hut. Every round is a season, and the first round is the longest because there are few hot stones. And then you start, I mean, you can do all kinds of things during those seasons pretty much, but you can sit in silence, or you can sing and chant, or just tell how you feel. Yeah, it can be whatever you like, pretty
Is there a
much.
specific formula that you would do, for example, chanting to reach one effect, or sing to reach another effect? Is there are there specific tactics that you can apply to do different things?
Yeah. So, for example, mimicking emotions will trigger real emotions. So, it's first off, it's kind of weird to do. Like you're laughing like ha 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 ha, or you're crying like oh my god, and but you're in complete darkness, and you hear all these folks around you doing the same sounds. And when you mimic these emotions, the real emotions start, floating to the surface. And that's one way to provoke emotions or feelings that do not want to be seen or put into the light. What I found really amazing is just chanting, and it can be your own song pretty much. It can be moaning or oh, with some drum beats, and for me that causes a different state of mind, and you're what I have experienced is you really get lost. You lose track of time and space, and you're really deep in yourself, to put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is it like you're being captured by your thoughts?
I would not. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, thoughts are mainly from the brain. But I think you're more captured by the experience and also by feelings that come up, which also obviously form visual things in your head.
Right. Okay.
But I would not call it thoughts or thinking, because you're not thinking about anything if you're
So it's more like
doing that.
either sinking into an emotion or an experience, falling into an experience, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It could be. I think it could be compared to a deep trance, deep trance or deep meditative state. But usually in meditation, you're really quiet. But in a sweat lodge or in those type of experience, you're busy, chanting or moving a bit, just to get into that space, pretty much.
Right, and this goes for the whole season, for the whole first season, then pretty much.
Yeah. So you start with winter. No, sorry. You start with spring, summer, autumn, winter. So these seasons have different meanings, but the meaning of the season does not really have to does not really have to be in line with the activity you're doing during that season. You know, like winter is the time to be silent and to retreat, but that does not necessarily mean that in the last round you have to be quiet, so to say.
So what do the different seasons symbolize? What are they? So two questions here. What are the differences in the experience that you're experiencing in the sweat lodge when you go through the different seasons? And the second question is, what do those different seasons symbolize? So why are they part of the experience?
They're part of the experience because the seasons were, they were of huge meaning and impact for I was going to say Native Americans, because that is the where I get the practice from. So
So that's
I'll
like
call
the
it.
original shamans from.
Well, the original shamans were scattered all over the world. So they're from Siberia to the Amazon to the Great Plains. So they were all around. But the practices I've been taught were mainly from North America. So to keep it simple, let's go with that. So the seasons were obviously very important for the Native Americans, and because every season has its own pros and cons, so to say. So you start with the spring, which is a time of light and growing and experiencing new things. Then you go into summer, which is a time of happiness, living intensely. It can be correlated to dancing and full on love, just getting out there. Then when you turn into autumn, which is a time of harvest before you go into the winter. So it's a time of retreating, reflecting a little bit of how the previous seasons were, and then you go into winter, into the winter sleep, and it's a time to reflect, recollect, and turn down, and before you go into the new year, starting with spring again.
It almost sounds like you're describing life in general.
Yeah. exactly. You can compare it to that. Yeah,
Exactly, because as a child, you're seeing the light for the first time. You are growing. You are turning into yourself, right?
yeah.
Then, as a young adult, which is then in this case the season of summer, you're being happy. You're being intense. You're working. You're working your career. You know, you're building your family. You're building your community, and you're loving the people around you. And then after that, you know, when you're in your late adulthood, that's when you see the fruits of what you've worked for. It's
Hmm.
time to retreat. It's time to reflect. But
Be
yeah,
with your loved ones.
exactly the thing that you worked for is there, and then at the end of your life, that's when you think, you contemplate, you reflect, and then finally, to use the first word that you used, you go into your winter sleep.
Hmm.
So it's actually it sounds like you are describing life when you're talking about the seasons. So is that a way to also look at the seasons and what they symbolize?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's nice you mentioned that, because for the winter, the natives used to say that that is where the elders and our ancestors live. So
Hmm.
when you're at the end of your life, you're in winter, you're going north pretty much. So that is where the old spirits are. Yeah.
Joining your ancestors.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, this actually makes perfect sense. Can you walk me through the practicality of the season? So you already said in spring, you're bringing in the hot stone from the outside.
Yeah.
That's being used to create a steam, and then you're sitting there. You might be chanting, you might be singing, there might be a drum involved. Is there anything else on the spring part that you would like to mention that can happen in that specific area before we move on to summer?
Um, No, no, not really, because every round is different, and with the
Hmm.
different sweat lodges I have experienced, there's not like a fixed a fixed way to do it.
A fixed
So
formula. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
there's not a fixed formula. The only thing that is fixed is that the first round, so spring, will be less warm, and so you build up the intensity of temperature, and the warmer it gets, the shorter the season is pretty
Hmm.
much. Um, but the thing is, it gets so warm, and you feel kind of afraid and scared. At least that was my experience when I was there for the first time. To get out, I need to get out. It's pitch black. It's
Hmm.
pitch black. You do not see anything. Yeah, sometimes you see the stones, glowing a little bit. Um, but the heat gets so intense that you just want to get out in this pitch blackness, and but when that is what you need to get through. You just need to be there and be with yourself, and just, yeah, face the heat, and the darkness, which your entire body and mind says, get out, get out, get out. But the trick is to stay there and be with yourself, and be with the heat, and
Be
the darkness. And that's when these emotions come up, which you have to face, and just deal with.
be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, and you build up the heat. Is that linear? So does every season like get hotter? So
Yeah.
is winter the hottest?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds
that's
odd, but that's right. Yeah.
okay. Okay, okay. Anything else regarding those switches between the seasons? So if you moved, so for example, how does the transition look? So the moment you go from spring to summer, is there someone who announces it? Does the fire first go out? How does it work?
Yeah. So it's you kind of feel it in the energy of the group when a season has ended, and
Okay.
then the one of the blankets opens up. We call it the door, so people, if they like, they can get out and have a sip of water, and then go back in. This time usually isn't like 5 minutes maximum. But then you go back in and go into the next season. Then the leader of the sweat lodge will state like the new subject or the new intention of the next season. He will describe the season. For example, in summer, this is well what I described before. In time of happiness, time of intense living, we will be saying prayers or being thankful. Take someone in your mind who you're very thankful of. You can speak out about it, and then you pretty much go into the new season. And the entire process from start to finish, like physically sitting in the lodge, usually takes up, it depends, it differs a bit, but usually like 3 or 4 hours.
The whole experience from start to finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like physically sitting in the lodge, because it's an entire day. You arrive at 10, we start chopping wood, you eat a little bit, start getting ready. We build a fire together, we say intentions, you meet up with each other, you eat a little bit before you go into the lodge, you undress, and then the real thing starts. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sitting quite a bit in the lodge, because I think you said you have 5-minute breaks in between to just grab a sip of water.
Yeah.
So every season is like half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And then the first season can be like 40 minutes, and the last season can be 20 minutes or 15 minutes or something.
Yeah, so it gradually goes down. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That actually makes sense regarding the whole sweat lodge experience. And maybe a last question before you move ahead to to the courses that you started doing. Do you know if this specific experience that you're describing right now was also done by the traditional shamans?
Yeah, I know that. Well, for the Native Americans, I know that, for example, when they came back from war, the warriors came back from war, and their spirit was, bloodthirsty, so to say. They used rituals to cleanse themselves and, get back to their own being, and a sweat lodge was one of the things to do that.
One of the ways to do that. Yeah. Okay. So you had like a tribe that had like how do you call them, a medicine doctor or medicine master, something like that? How do you call like the
a medicine man. But shamans, they, in their communities, they had like multiple roles. They could be natural doctor, pretty much, a priest, a medicine man, but also a mystic. So they had different type of roles in their respective tribes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like they were the people that were interested in the same thing that you were interested in, which is healing others, helping other people.
Yeah.
Because indeed, like you said, one of the things that the traditional shamans, I believe, did was perform rituals and ceremonies to heal physical, emotional, or spiritual ailments.
Yeah.
And they used herbal remedies and chanting and different trance states in order to do that. So that was one of the things. And that's pretty much what you're describing right now also in the sweating lodge, I think. That specific part of the shaman.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And one of the second things that they did was seeking guidance or knowledge by communicating with spirits, other entities, but also their ancestors, and that's also something that you described.
Yeah.
But I think you didn't experience that in the first sweat lodge, right? You did. This was later.
This was, well, I had an experience in the first sweat lodge in which I could really feel the grief and sadness of my grandfather who has lost his only son because he was in an accident when he was 16. Let me think of how to put this. There was not, back in the day, people did not speak about these things, but there is a lot of grief and a lot of sadness that has not had any attention or room, to be felt. These practices can be a way of allowing these feelings and these emotions which have been repressed by our ancestors to give them space, and to they allowed me to experience the sadness which needed to be felt in order to make things right. It may sound a little bit odd, but that is, I could really feel that I was crying my grandfather's tears, although I had not ever pretty much heard him speak about it, or I have never, met my uncle. I know a picture of him. So yeah, for me that was really an eye-opening experience, and made the spiritual world and this type of work very, very real for me, and it made me decide, like, yeah, this is the path I want to go. This is what I need to do.
All right, and we are back. So there was a small power outage on my side. My network operator all of a sudden decided to cut the cables, so I was out for like 4 hours. But we are good to go again, David. Thank you so
We're
much
back
for
online.
waiting. Yeah, yeah. Really appreciate that you could still come on. Really appreciate that.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so I listened to the recording where
Yeah.
it ended, and the last thing that you said was that you experienced grief and sadness from your ancestors that you felt didn't get the chance back then to be experienced, and now you had a chance to pretty much express or experience that sadness in order to, to quote you, to make things right again. Yeah, could you break it down a little bit? What was that experience like for you? How did it work? What was the result of that? Could you walk me through that process?
I was in the sweat lodge, and I was thinking, or I was experiencing the spirit of my grandfather, and then all of a sudden it was like a door was opened, and there was this, let's call it, entity of the uncle I never had, or I never met, and there came so much sadness and grief over me, and the feeling of pain and sorrow that has not had room to be felt, that there was no real acknowledgement for it, because things were kept, well, it was not kept silent in the past, but it happened, and it was not really discussed out in the open like we do these days with traumatic experiences we have. So it's quite important. That's also what happened in the old tribes. People used to honor their ancestors. So their ancestors, though they were spirits, were kept alive by rituals, for example, to be able to meet them in the sweat lodge, making contact with your ancestors, remember them, honoring them, and by doing this, it can give you insights of certain troubles you might experience in this lifetime, because we all carry the blood and DNA from our ancestors. So it's good to getting to know your grandfather or grandmother or your great grandfather and the generations before that, to know your heritage and to know where you really come from. For me, personally, the experience was, I could feel something shifted in me, and something was healed afterwards, just by acknowledging the sadness and the pain my grandfather had back then.
Do you have a so how specific is this experience for you? Can you, for example, recount the name of the person? Can you know in which year you are actively experiencing that? So how specific does this experience get?
It's not like you go back in time or whatever.
Mhm.
You can just feel the emotion that was being kept from receiving the space that was needed to feel it and
Mhm.
acknowledging it, to give it, to give it a place, and to heal the trauma, to finalize the trauma pretty much. And it was not like, oh, I can see him, or I can hear him. It was just a very, very honest emotion that hit the surface, and I knew immediately that this is my grandpa, and this is his name. His son's name was Dick, and I knew it was him. I also read it. I wrote everything down from that weekend, and yeah, it gives me goosebumps. And another thing that was really, really fascinating was that, so this happened on a Saturday, and the week after I was at the home of my parents in my old bedroom for no particular reason, and I was going through some stuff, and I found this old wallet which belonged to my mother, and I opened the wallet, and there, the first thing I grabbed out of the wallet was this little photograph of him, of Dick, just, and I even talking about it gives me goosebumps. So from that experience and the experience with the photograph, it kind of confirms for me that there's more to what we see and experience in this world or this life.
Yeah, so you had the experience. You had that experience first with your ancestors, in which Dick was a part of.
Yeah.
Before you even knew his face or his name or anything like that.
I knew his name and his face, but I never thought about him. I mean, I know it happened in the past, but it was nothing personal for me.
Right,
but
so
what
it was
happened
just
in
a
the sweat
random
lodge
ancestor.
was really profound, and I could really feel the sorrow, and and then finding a photograph of him a few days after. For me, coincidences do not really happen. It's there's more to it, and
There's a reason behind it.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So this for me confirmed the whole experience, and the whole spiritual way of seeing things and experiencing things. Yeah.
You said something shifted in you. What shifted? Was it understanding? Was it the fact that you realized that there was something else that might not be physical around us, like a second sort of reality, or maybe a dimension, however you want to call it? Just an understanding that more is connected than meets the eye. What was it that shifted in you?
Yeah, I could really understand the things my grandfather did or not did. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this experience confirmed to me that there's more between heaven and earth, to say, to put it like that. And for me, there came this calmness over me, and this feeling that was quite serene, actually, and it was like, it's okay now, it's okay. The tears have been shed, the pain has been felt, and it's good to go. It's okay to move on, and to get the energy flowing again from a wound that was, well, for me it felt like the wound had been healed at that moment.
Okay, so this was regarding the sweat lodge. that gave you that experience. And I believe,
Yeah.
if I recount correctly, a couple of weeks later, that's when you met Jos Kester.
Jos, I actually met, well, of course, before, like 8 years before that happened. And then I
Mhm.
had the sweat lodge like 4 years ago. And then after that, I think about a year after, I met Jos again. I got the newsletter and I decided to
Right.
yeah, this is it. Yeah.
And what happened then?
Well, so I contacted Jos and I told him, yeah, we met before, and yeah, pretty much what I told you. Yeah, to me it was quite complex. I did not understand anything or most of what you meant. But I've been in the sweat lodge last year, and I had this experience. So yeah, it feels like this is a natural step to gain more knowledge about natural spirituality, I guess. So then we met a few times before we started the course, just to get to know each other a bit more, because it was such a long time ago, and we had some really good conversations about, well, our personal lives. And then we started with the course. Yeah. And the courses were during the weekends. So this was in a group in which everyone, of course, is in his own process, but you're also in the process of the group, which gives some interesting dynamics because everything brings something different to the table. But the main thing is to get more knowledge and insight of your in pretty much into yourself and of the being that you are.
And what do other people bring to the table? Is that like in terms of experiences or in terms of skill or anything else?
Yeah, experiences. Everyone has his own life, lives his own life. We had a lady who had been living in Albania for a very long time, and she had some childhood trauma. There were people who had experiences with really strict upbringing with religion, going to church, stuff like that, which has impacted their lives in a grand scale. So yeah, everyone brought something different to the table, and I also think for any individual or for every individual, the process was different. It had different outcomes. Yeah.
What was the end result of the course? What did it provide you?
Well, for me, it provided a lot of insight of myself, to myself, and also to be able to give my anger room, and also to be able to acknowledge things that have been hurting in the past, and also being able to honor your ancestors, so my grandfathers, and make them a part of the life that you're living at this moment. Yeah.
Aside from the experiences themselves, how do you make sure that you honor your ancestors in your daily life?
That can be very easy. I have, it may sound a bit heavy, but I just have a shrine with pictures of my grandfathers, picture of my grandmother with a few rocks beside them, a feather, and they're in my dressing room, so I pass them every day and I look at it, and for me, it gives me support and a way that I know that they're always there. I always know that my grandfathers, they got my back. It really feels like that. And when I think of them, I can feel the support, and I know that they are they're proud. Yeah.
Why do you think people today seek out shamanic practices? What are people looking for, you think? Maybe you have some in your own experience that you met people that are looking for something specific that you can use as examples.
I think people, well, I think it differs per person, of course. I think shamanic practices do not teach doctrines, or they do not have a figure like a prophet that is the main character in of worship. Shamanic practice or shamanism is not a religion. It's more a way of practicing spirituality through your senses, and usually also by using nature as a mirror or as a tool to, provoke certain thoughts or emotions. So it's not a religion in that manner. It does not teach doctrines. It does not have opinions or reasons and consequences. It does not teach this is good, this is bad, you should be doing this, you should not be doing that. It is just what it is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so you can have like a Christian person or an agnostic person that can engage in this as well.
Yes, of course. Though some religious people have quite big opinions of things like this. They consider it to be magic, and who are you to work with the spirits and not with the creator, or some people have big negative opinions about it.
What is your answer to that?
Treat your neighbor like you would treat yourself.
In the sense of let live.
Yeah.
Don't
exactly.
judge.
Don't judge. And I think both things, religion and shamanic practices, can go hand in hand with each other. Faith is something different than experiencing, spiritual stuff, because shamanism is not a religion. It's a practice of certain things.
It sounds to me like, and let me know what you think about this. So with my very limited knowledge on this subject matter, it sounds to me like a different form of praying. So it's not about who you are praying to, it's the engaging with the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Which is what you do when you pray, I think. And it sounds to me like the engaging in shamanistic practices. So whether it's in a sweat lodge or whether it is with some other techniques that you can use, and let's discuss this later on. Maybe you have a couple of different ones that you can talk about. But it sounds to me like it's the way to connect to the spiritual realm or the spectral realm, or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair estimate?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair description of techniques that can be used.
Right.
Well, there are all, because when you're drumming, for example, and you go into this state, like meditative state. I would not call it praying per se, but you do engage with the spiritual realm. Yeah. So I think it's a good description. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So going back to the question, what the reason is that people are seeking out shamanistic practices? So you mentioned a couple of things there. You mentioned reconnecting with spirituality, in which nature is a very big tool, and you also mentioned that it doesn't really matter per se what religion you hold or identify with. It's more like the practice itself that can provide you insight in yourself, in your heritage, in your family, in your environment, that can provide in turn a form of peace and a form of understanding.
Absolutely.
Are there some other things that you think can be very big drivers why people are seeking out these practices?
I think a big driver is also that, in today's world, we have lost touch with nature. And I think shamanic practices are a good way to reconnect with nature and get insights of nature from nature and her wisdom. I mean, you get more insight from being quiet, maybe drumming a little bit for half an hour, sitting at a tree, just emptying your mind, being in the present, than by looking at your iPhone for 30 minutes. But that is what we do these days.
It's longer than 30 minutes, probably, in
It's
most
longer
cases.
than 30 minutes. Yeah, I think it's like we look at our cell phones for like 4 hours each day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, that's how you get out of touch with nature. And I mean, we all derive from nature, so we lose touch with ourselves as well by the virtual world and the swiftness of everything that surrounds us. Even fast food or buying stuff from Amazon, we do not receive it within like 2 or 3 days. You're like, oh, what happened? Because it's not here yet. But I think it's a good way to slow down and to get different insights and go inside and find peace in that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions coming up with me right now,
Sure.
and let's take these part by part because else it's going to be too long. But I'm very curious what the general benefits are of people that engage in shamanistic practices. So we already discussed a couple, right? The understanding and the connecting with nature, and those things. Are there any other clear benefits that you can point out? Like, hey, this is across the board, or at least in most cases where people engage in shamanistic practices, these are the benefits those people are experiencing.
From the groups I have assisted in or been at, a big part of people get insight into their past and their ancestors, and pretty much like what I described. So they're able to heal things that have happened in the past, and it gives them comfort and healing, and it feels like something has ended with them, something that happened in the past ended with them, and they're able to give forward the new situation without the trauma that has occurred or has been carried by them and their ancestors for generations. So it feels like a clean sheet. Yeah, that is what most of the time.
Right. Okay. If it's okay, if it's okay with you, I would like to play devil's advocate for just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So to put on the head of the skeptic, not necessarily because I'm skeptical, but I'm really curious what your answer to the next couple of questions is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's pretty clear that people can be very creative. People dream a lot, they have huge imaginations, and sometimes those imaginations can take the overhand.
Mm-hmm.
A very clear example of that, well, a very straightforward example I can give you is with sleep paralysis, where someone is technically still sleeping, their body is still sleeping, but their mind is on the verge of waking up. So they open their eyes, but they can't move their body yet. So they're in between sleep and being awake. And then what can happen is, if you, for example, had a nightmare, is that the nightmare manifests itself in your environment. So your eyes are open, and all of a sudden, you see these entities standing around in your bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
which is hugely terrifying for just a couple of seconds until your body is awake and you can do something about it, and you realize that you were actually dreaming. Some people might only experience it one times in their life, or not no times at all, and some people have it quite often. My point is, that's the mind at work, pretty much. That's imagination going astray, I think, at least. So how do you differentiate when you're having these experiences between imagination, or between what's in your mind, and between the, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but the actual connection to spirituality and what flows out of that. How do you differentiate, and how do you differentiate between those two?
It's a good question. I think it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest. I was thinking about saying experiencing the emotion, to know, to feel that, because it's all about feeling, and experiencing, to feel that whatever is happening happens. But on the other hand, the example you described with sleep paralysis, I've experienced it myself. It's um so scary, and um that's also real emotions of fear, so yeah, I think it's, yeah, I would not draw a conclusion to that, to be honest. No, I think it's, no, I would not draw a conclusion to that.
Are there a couple of mechanisms that you can use to differentiate between the two? So, for example, and maybe I'm making a stretch here, and maybe that doesn't help. So feel free to correct me anytime I'm saying something wrong. But if the question is something like, how do you differentiate between what is real and what is a dream? There's a couple of mechanisms that, well, I think most kids are being taught. I'm not sure if it was for you, but it was certainly for me. Like, hey, if you are in a nightmare, pinch yourself, and if it doesn't hurt, you know you are dreaming.
Yeah.
So that's a clear mechanism to differentiate between the two. At the same time, I also know that if you, well, in the sleep paralysis example, if you wake up and you have that experience, your mind doesn't have a lot of time to process what is happening, to rationalize, the things that you are seeing. So, like you said, the first thing you experience is intense fear, because all of a sudden there's these entities around. So you can't go through the motion of pinching yourself, seeing if it's real or whatever.
No, you can't move.
Exactly. So what I'm looking for, and I'm also thinking with you what mechanisms could be, and nothing really comes to mind right now, but the question, the technical question that I'm asking is, what is the difference between a shamanistic experience and a dream, or something that you imagine? And emotions, I think, is not an answer, because in dreams you can also have emotions. You can
Yeah,
also
exactly.
you can wake up crying pretty much, or
Yeah.
you can wake up angry or hurt or fearful. So emotions per se is maybe not in that sense an answer to the question, at least not to differentiate those two with each other. Is there something that comes to mind with you? So what is the difference? Maybe let me ask it this way. What is the difference in feeling or in an experience or anything like that between a shamanistic experience in a sweat lodge and a dream that you have during the night? How do you differentiate those two?
I think, well, what comes to mind is that, first of all, in a sleep or in a sweat lodge, you provoke the spirit, or whatever it is you want to assess. So you scratch the surface to see what comes out, and when you're in a dream state, you're just dreaming, and that's it. So you're deliberately putting yourself in this place where you want to have certain experiences. I think
So
that's,
maybe that can be boiled down to bodily stress, in the sense of you are in a sweat lodge where it's very warm, which causes stress on the body.
yeah, that could, yeah, but on the other hand, you can also have experiences with shamanic practices that do not consist of any stress at all,
Okay,
because
yeah, fair enough.
yeah, so and you do enter into this kind of dream state, but I think the big difference is that you're aware, you're kind of lucid, so you're there, but
Right.
you're not there. I think that might be the nuance to it.
What would happen if you were in a sweat lodge in that mental state and I would walk in and talk to you? Would you hear me, or how would that come into you?
I As a huge disturbance.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because you really feel like you're in the zone. And it's not like if you're in this meditative state. So, well, for example, let's take praying. If you're praying, or if someone is in church praying, and someone passes by and taps the person on the shoulder, yeah, you're disturbed. I think that would be the same as if you would enter a sweat lodge, or you would, start tearing off blankets.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is why at least with what you're telling me right now, why I like the praying example so much.
Yeah,
Because praying is like the mechanism of connecting with the spiritual realm or with the
yeah.
divine in this case. And that experience that you are experiencing is pretty much the same thing. You're pretty much opening a gateway to the spiritual realm in which you are directly connecting with that. So and I think it's very fragile. So the moment you get like an external impulse of someone touching you or somebody walking in and talking to you or anything at all, it instantly disrupts and even disconnects that gateway that you've crafted over half an hour maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally right.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Let's take a jump to nature. Could you walk me through a shamanistic practice that brings one or more people to nature and how that goes? So another one aside from the sweat lodge. And could you also describe to me how the process of getting into a trance state works exactly from start to finish? So how does one achieve that?
A trance state can be provoked usually in shamanic tradition. The shaman, or the person who is in service of the other, starts drumming just on a normal drum, dum 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 dum, and
Like a constant
he
beat.
yeah, constant beat, exactly. And the person starts describing a place, which can be, let's say, at a river.
And
And
this person
he
is the leader of the group?
Yeah, the lead. It can be it can be the shaman. I do not want to say he or she is the shaman, because you're always learning, and it can be a lifetime until you can say you're a shaman. So I would also not call myself a shaman in any way. But no, the person starts drumming and starts a guided meditation, which can start, for example, at a river. He describes a site in nature. So, for example, well, you see this river flowing, and it's sunny day. You feel the warm breeze on your skin. You look around, and you see this huge waterfall just pouring down. You're in the woods. The trees are green and lush, and you decide to approach this waterfall. And when you approach this waterfall, you see that behind the curtain of water is a hole, and you entered this hole. So the hole is a symbolic thing for entering a different world. So the person has to go through. It can be a hole, it can be a doorway, it can be whatever, just to be in this different, or to get in this different world.
Like a
Um,
gateway.
like a gateway. Yeah, exactly. And then when the person is or passed through this gateway, he or she sees, well, whatever pops up. It's usually a depiction of nature. Animals can cross, people can cross, and the one that pretty much escorts the other person, or is in charge of the drumming, he starts singing or chanting, and the person that is in the different state of mind just stays in this world, can walk around, can experience different things, gets insights, gets experiences, and then when it's time to come back, the one that is on the drum starts drumming quickly, like doom 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 doom.
Right. So the beat speeds up when you're trying to go towards the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then it's time to go back, and the participant goes back through the gateway he entered the different realm into. He goes back from the waterfall, and he's back at the riverside, and can slowly wake up again. It is it's pretty much a guided meditation. Yeah.
Okay, so they pretty much went back to their bodies, and now it's time to wake up again.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long does this whole practice take? So the moment that they go into the forest, go to the cave, enter that gateway, have the experience, and then go all the way back?
20-30 minutes, something like that. Yeah.
And what does that experience provide them? What does it give them?
Well, sometimes they can they see animals, and these animals have a meaning. They're totem animals, or they're power animals, so they will be able to also speak with the animals, for example. And it can be, from a horse to a bear to a mouse, so that's quite broad. There are many books written about these totem animal types. I don't know the exact description of all of them, but usually when people look them up, they know, oh, it makes sense because blah 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 blah.
And what is a totem animal? Is it an animal that symbolizes something?
Yeah, a totem animal is an animal. Yeah, and a power animal. So you carry this animal with you, and it gives you power. So, for example, if you, when you were a little kid, you had a fascination for, let's say, wolves or whales or whatever, that can be a sign that your totem animal or your power animal is a whale or a wolf. And in the way you approach things or you live your life, the qualities of that animal can be found in how you do things. And then when you do a bit of research on the animals, usually you're able to find connections with yourself and the qualities of that animal.
What is your totem animal?
What I saw in my experience when I did this the first time, I met a bear and a whale.
A bear and a whale.
Yeah.
And why do you think a bear and a whale? What do they symbolize for you?
The bear is an animal that takes care of his family, an animal that, they have their winter sleep, so they go back and be quiet and reflect on things, but they're also very powerful and persistent. They're funny, and they take care of their cubs. So those are things I can relate to. And the whale, well, the whale for me has always been a kind of a magical animal, really. I don't know why, but to me, a whale is such a spiritual being. I cannot really explain it, why that is, but for me, the connection with the whale is, being a very spiritualistic person in that way. Yeah.
If I think about which in turn also might mean that they are very wise. They don't have a lot of natural predators, I think. I mean, you have, for example, killer whales that go after sharks, so
Yeah,
there's that.
yeah.
But they, I believe, especially with, for example, the bluebacks, they also take care of their little ones. Also, I believe they stay together for a long time. So that there's some parallels between that and the bear example that you gave.
Yeah, and also they live in solitude. So also
Hmm.
the mother bears also go with their cubs and live together. And I think whales do the same thing. Like the mama whale goes with their little ones, or
Hmm.
usually it's one.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How do you think people, if they even pick it consciously, how do you think they choose their totem animals? Is it because you said it's an animal that they used to like, for example, back when they were children? So you give the wolf example. Is
Yeah.
that generally the way how those totem animals get formed, or is it also like a conscious decision right now? Like I want this animal right now to be part because of this reason.
No, 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 no. It usually happens not on a conscience matter,
Okay.
deliberate matter.
Okay, so
Uh,
it's like past experiences or past interest, something that you
yeah,
inherently have a connection with.
yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay. Do you also guide people yourself with these shamanistic practices? So whether it's a sweat lodge or whether it's going to nature to connect with nature and to have these events, do you guide others with that?
I help people to go out into nature and to use nature as a tool for them to get insights. So I go out with them and they may have questions they want to assess or get insights to. We go to the woods, for example, and we start walking, and I just ask them, so what do you see in this scenery that sticks out? Well, no, it's this tree. Ah, okay. And what kind of how does your issue or your question relate to that tree? Well, then they form a story or a a way the tree can be symbol for what they are experiencing, and they're able to approach the tree, they're able to touch the tree, they're able to walk around the tree. So they're able to maneuver around the question they have, like literally, and that usually gives great insights to people about the questions they have. And it's funny that unconsciously they pick out things that are really like great symbols for the things they want answers to.
How do they find you? What is the reason? What are they looking for, and how do you start a process with them?
Yeah, so an introduction would be well, it usually you can do like a phone call, but I much prefer a face-to-face contact, because you can look each other in the eye, you can feel, and I mean, you know right away if there's someone across from you that you can connect to and you feel good with or safe with. So that is one thing. And then you start assessing what type of questions they have or things they would like to get more insight on. So I would call myself more like a coach, and for example, for questions they have on their career, or they may have struggles in a relationship, or yeah, things like that.
And what are they looking for when they find you? So what is the reason that they are looking for something, and that something has led to you?
Because they because they might have questions or things occur that they find hard to get around themselves, and they're looking for guidance in that. on a, well, not on a in a very heavy, or like, yeah, how am I going to put this? They have questions, or they have things that might be too light for like a psychologist or something, but it might be a bit too heavy to handle themselves. So they look for guidance, or a bit of coaching. Yeah.
Do you have a couple of examples of those kind of situations? So what have you experienced as reasons to be looking for something like this?
Well, questions like, should I make a career move? Should I stick with my job, or should I go along and pursue a different career? It can be with a relationship. People, they are with their partner, but they have these patterns, but they do not know where it comes from, and they would like to have a bit more insight into it and into their own behavior. And it can really help them visualize what is happening, or approach it differently, seeing things more clearly, if that makes sense.
A little bit. So let's just take one example, right? Someone comes towards you or finds you. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Somebody has relationship problems, whether it's a man or a woman. They are looking for answers on how to fix that, and somehow they come to you. What is between that? So what is like the missing step between, okay, I have relationship problems, to, okay, we're gonna engage in a shamanistic practice? What is between that? Is it like specific keywords that they're looking for, or on Google or something like that points them towards a website, or is it that they go towards a relationship coach which advises them to take this route?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of personal preference.
Okay, so like a spiritual person might be more inclined to go this route.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And maybe someone who is less spiritual might go to a relationship counselor, or
Mhm.
those type of people.
Do you also guide people with trauma, or is it just more like practical problems, like relationship problems or career problems or anything like that?
Well, sometimes it happens that trauma comes to the surface, and if it's not too heavy, there are situations you can work on. You can find out things, but if things are really severe and are very serious, then it's not my place to help them. Then these people have to find like professional help, and find a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or if traumas are really severe, I'm not the person to help them.
Right. And where do you draw that line? So what is something that they can come to you for, and what is something that they can't come to you for?
Yeah. Let me. Yeah, I think people who start developing disorders, or who have like really like who get mental problems or physical problems. Where to draw that line is where you don't you it's hard to find out up front, because people do not go in. You don't go into the depth in the first place, or in the first conversation. But when things occur that are too heavy, you need to forward them to to professional help. Where I would draw that line, um, when it doesn't feel right for me anymore, I think.
When was the last time that happened?
Well, to be honest, I never had such severe cases with people. I mean, I had people who had some type of trauma, but it was not so severe that they needed to be forwarded to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. For example, I had this older lady who could remember things in a. She was separated from her mom and dad, and she was in the hospital, and she always had this feeling that it was hard for her to connect with her mom and dad. And when she was in the hospital, she was like 4 years old. She was behind this glass curtain or whatever, and she could not reach her parents. Then, so that was the trauma she had with not really being able to connect with her parents. We started working with that physical work, where do you feel the pain? What do you feel? Then put it into a place like, so that's where you literally walk in the forest in a dark place. How does it feel here? Can you recall the feeling you had back then? So she could feel it. Then we walked to a different place, much more into the light. And then I asked her, can you provoke the same feeling back then? In this place, how does it feel? Oh yeah, it feels much more light. And then we go back again to compare it. How the initial feeling was when we started, when we transformed it, when we were back into the light, and then we went back into the initial position for her to experience how it felt after the transformation. And for her, it was much lighter, and she could see like literally different things compared to the first time. So for her, the part of the trauma that she described was healed because she could see much more light coming through the bushes and through the leaves and through the forest, and she could hear different sounds, and it all comes down to a different experience compared to the initial when you start with the initial question.
Okay, so
If that makes sense.
yeah, it does. And this happened in 2 sessions. So in the first session, you figured out what the issue was. In the second session, you found out that the thing that you did in the first session helped, and she gave you good feedback, like, hey, the trauma, which in this case was a physical ailment, is less or gone right now, and that's how you know it was a success in those 2 sessions.
Yeah.
And those 2 sessions were how long per session, you think?
The first one was also with her husband. I think it was like 2 hours, and the last one was about 1.5 hours.
Okay, so in 3.5 hours in total.
But you start walking and you work towards the issue that you're handling, and so it starts off nice and light and how's it going, and then you go into the depths and you start working with whatever the issue may be.
How do you confirm the long-term benefit of the process and make sure that the ailment doesn't come back or that it's gone to begin with?
Well, people say that they feel that things have shifted. I also send out feedback forms in which they can, tell about their experience. But in the long run, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think if they do not come back with me with any more issues, then it's probably worked for them.
Yeah, or they want to take a different approach.
That could be the case as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a completely different perspective of looking on it, but generally speaking, for example, in business, if you send out feedback surveys and people don't react, or you provided them a solution or something like that, and you don't hear anything back from them, you can indeed make the argument, okay, it's solved because I'm not hearing any complaints. But the other thing that can happen is these people figured out that it's not for them, and they're going to try a competitor in this specific situation, or an alternative practice in your situation. So yeah, pretty much what I'm trying to get at is confirming that the work that you are doing is actually objectively providing positive benefits, and the mechanism of making sure that you know that. So an example of that, I think, with a psychiatrist or with a psychoanalyst or something like that, these people, they have contact with the same client for a long time. It might be, multiple sessions over a couple of weeks, but it might also be months and sometimes even years. So that provides you a mechanism in which to evaluate the person and track their progress, and continue to talk to them, and continue to probe their reactions, and to see how they're dealing with life in general from in the very beginning of when the session started until the point where we are right now. So that's a very direct feedback point that you can use to decide, okay, are we on the right track, or are you misshooting the target? And I'm trying to figure out how you can do that also in your specific practice. And I don't have a instant answer to that question, except for doing something in the long term. So like, I don't know how many sessions, but more than 2 sessions. So I'm repeating the same question, but how do you confirm that what you're doing is beneficial in the long term? Or is there something that can be still done on that in that regard?
I think that there can be something done in that regard. I agree to that. And I think you are right with doing multiple or longer sessions, or longer for a longer period of time. But I'm not the person to tell them, I think you need 3, 4, or 5 sessions, because the coachee needs to feel, I mean, it pretty much comes down to what the coachee feels. Yeah, if he feels it has been okay like this for me, it feels all right, it's finished, or I think there might be something more to it, we can do another session, or we can do multiple sessions. It's their decision, but I'm not a qualified medical psychologist or psychiatrist who can say, well, I have seen this with you, I think we need to go in a process of 6 months, and I need to see you every week, simply because it's not, I do not have a study for that or something, and it's not been it's not an acknowledged practice in that way, or in that regard. And that's what makes it that's what makes it also less concrete to apply, because to a lot of people it might sound like I do not know what the word in English is. It may sound like a bit of quackery, because I do not have a medical background or something like that. But if it works for people, and if they have results from it, and they feel better, and they feel they can continue, or they have surpassed this obstacle they had, because we went out into the woods and we talked about their issues, we worked with nature a bit. I mean, yeah, for me it's a success, though I cannot back it up with scientific papers or whatever,
I think this is how it sounds to me right now. So you are not pretending to be a psychological expert, which is clearly you've said that multiple times.
Yeah.
And when something is too heavy, and we didn't really define what too heavy is, but I can think of a couple of examples where things will be too heavy.
Let's say addiction or misconduct in their past, or things like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then you would advise them to go a different route.
Yeah.
But when the goal is to get in contact with themselves, with the spiritual realm, or to explore what life can be, and just to have a different way of looking at life in general, then that is something that you can provide for them. And then you move forward with that, and that provides a form of, in the end, it provides a form of clarity or a form of understanding or a form
Yeah.
of reconnecting with the past, where you understand what your position in life is and where where you're coming from and who you have around you, and appreciate it properly. I
And
think that
also
is primarily what you're trying to do.
yeah, and also hopefully provide a clear sight of a target that can be attained in the future.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay, that completely makes sense. There's one last thing I would like to bring up, and it's something I
Mm-hmm.
believe you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, and you were talking about shadow work.
Yeah.
And with the shadow, I believe you are referencing the Jungian shadow, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, by a shadow, you mean a human's darker side, a human's
Mm-hmm.
trauma, a human's potential to do, for example, evil. Is that what you're referencing to?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah. So shadow work, the shadow that is in each and every one of us is our dark side with the suppressed feelings, our anger or our sadness or lust or whatever that we like to keep away from other people and also keep away from ourselves. So the shadow is everything we do not want to be, but we are from time to time. So um, shadow work involves provoking these feelings in a safe environment in which you can be angry or you can let out the sorrow that has been under the surface for a very long time and give it the space it needs to be able to heal that part of yourself or to put that part of yourself into the light, which has been suppressed for so long. I often make the example of when you have a balloon and you start to suppress it underwater. The more you suppress it, the deeper you want to push it into the water. The faster and harder it comes back up underneath the surface, and that is a bit how shadow work works. So the more you suppress your dark side, the harder it will explode through the surface when it's there, and it can be there in an instant.
How do you make sure that the shadow doesn't take over when he's up there? So if a trauma is being provoked and the trauma is being brought to light, how do you make sure that you're properly equipped to deal with that without destroying the person who is bringing it forward? And and maybe to flesh it out a little bit, the reason why I'm asking is because people can have all kinds of different, very deep problems, and you've already stated that if something is too heavy, you will not guide them. But there might be a situation where you're not noted in advance, so you are still dealing with that in the moment. If a person is dealing with very deep traumas from the past, which can be quite bad, and you provoke that and it comes forward, generally speaking, doing that without the proper supervision by, for example, a psychologist or psychoanalyst or psychotherapist, that might cause all kinds of problems. So, how do you prevent it from happening? How do you make sure that you're equipped to deal with that?
It's a good question because I've never had that happen before. Um, there have been cases, things have become, which became quite physical, like almost fighting with each other. But
With
it's
you and with someone you're guiding?
yeah. So yeah, maybe that's kind of the safeguard. You never do this alone. you're always with someone who's there to assist or be there as a third person if things go out of hand, to get you back into the
Back to
moment.
reality.
Yeah, back to reality when things get intense, and it can become quite intense. But I never, it has never been, it has never exceeded like physical wrestling and getting on the ground, being barely being able to breathe because you're caught up with another guy. But it has never exceeded from that, from to like hitting someone or
It has never turned violent.
it has never turned violent, because there's always the precaution of the other person who says, okay, it has been enough now.
Right.
But even then, things, when you calm down and you're sitting there with the other person with whom you've been wrestling minutes before, things happen. Things happen inside you, and usually there's a lot of tears involved afterwards, and relief.
And is it beneficial? Does it help?
Yeah, people feel relieved because they have suppressed these feelings of anger or resentment or sadness for so long, and the shadow was being put into the light and was shown in a controlled environment, which it could, peek around the day-to-day person, so to say, and it usually causes lots of crying and a huge sense of relief and calmness afterwards, and also being able to put things into perspective and give insight or closure to certain behaviors you've had for a long time.
Right. Let's move on to the next one, and maybe we can close with this one. Psychedelics.
Yeah.
What is the current role of psychedelics in shamanistic experiences, in your personal experience?
Well, let me start off with saying I have used psychedelics in the past, but I have not used them for shamanistic experiences. I've used them, back in the day for recreational use, but not for spiritual use. That being said, I know a lot of people who have used it, so I'm gonna tell not from first-hand experience, but from second-hand experience. So there are different types of psychedelics you can take in order to attain a different state of mind, which is usually people say they feel connected to the universe and they can go back to the source of things and they know everything and they can see all the connections. And with all the connections, I also mean like family dynamics and things like that. The unseen lines that are there in your family, but also with your friends, and people can visit anyone in any time. So there are different types of psychedelics. The most popular here in the Netherlands, to my knowledge, is ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is derived from a root from plants that come from South America. The root is being boiled into a liquid. The person drinks the liquid and they have this spiritual psychedelic experience.
And what does it do exactly?
Well, from what I've understood is that people go through different phases. So, I don't know, have you heard of the third eye?
Yeah, so pretty much your imagination, imaginary eye.
Yeah, so they say in our pineal gland is the third eye. So the
Hmm.
third eye would be located just above our eyebrows in the middle, but in the middle between our eyes. So from what I have understood is that you go out of your third eye and people are able to experience out of pretty much have an out of body experience,
Hmm.
and they see all types of colors and they understand everything. They can talk to animals, but what I've also understood is that you have to be in a good state of mind and not be depressive or have anxieties, because if you have these types of feelings and you start taking these psychedelics, you can go into a very dark place and also stay in this very dark place, and you can get psychosis and things like that. But
Yeah, so it enhances pretty much a negative feeling or a positive
yeah,
feeling, whatever you're feeling at
yes,
that moment.
yes, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, so taking psychedelics if you're depressed or something like that might, generally speaking, not be the best idea.
No, exactly. But also, no, exactly. But also, I mean, it also happens when someone smokes cannabis or weed. If you're depressed, it only enhances the feeling of depression, and you feel more negative about yourself or the situation when you're doing that.
Right. Yeah, I've heard quite amazing stories with that, and I don't know the substances that are being used, but in different podcasts were being talked about that psychedelics in general can have all kinds of different effects, and it can provide understanding of the universe, so understanding of who we are, what our place is, where we stand in life, that kind of things. It can also provide adventure, so it takes people places where the normal human imagination cannot take us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also heard of a case a couple of weeks ago where, and I think that was in a podcast by Joe Rogan. I'm not sure who his guest was anymore. I would have to look it up. But it was a, if I remember correctly, it was a man who served in the Middle East,
Yeah.
who got wounded quite badly, who
I
went
think
home.
that's funny you mentioned this, because I think I've listened to this podcast yesterday when I was in the gym working out. This guy is named Ryan Shaw, I think, and
Might be, yeah.
he also has a podcast which is quite huge actually. And yeah, oh, that's so funny you mentioned this. You know, this is the universe working.
Yeah, but this is bizarre because the claim
Yeah,
that he made, and for me it's a couple of weeks ago, so correct me if I'm wrong, because
yeah,
for you it's
yeah. You're
fresher.
right. You're right. It was like I think in end of August or something, or
Yeah,
beginning of
yeah, yeah.
September.
But the claim that he made was okay. He came home. He was heavily wounded. He couldn't do anything for like 6 months or something like that,
Yeah,
or he could do very minimal. I think he was crippled, or there was something wrong with him. And he had the psychedelic experience, and after that, he recovered like
yeah.
almost. Now, well, not instantly, but
Like
very fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He mentioned he had this guy he was on tour with, indeed in the Middle East, and this guy was very badly wounded,
Yes.
and he had PTSD. He could barely move. He did not have sex with his wife for 2 years, and he was very depressed. Then he went to Mexico and he took this psychedelic or called Ibogaine.
Abigail. Yeah, that was it.
Ibogaine, and he had this experience. He did not really go into that though about the experience the guy had, but he was telling that when he had that and he came back to the States, he felt much better. He banged his wife for the first time again in 2 years, and life was much better in general. And that was all. And his PTSD was much less severe. And he said it was all due to the due to using the ibogaine root.
Yeah, this quite amazes me because I believe that substance is very illegal, at least in Europe and in the United States. And apparently, and if this is true, I don't know. My only data point is the podcast, but if this is true, this is a substance that very clearly can help people recover with very serious both mental and physical issues, which makes you wonder why it's illegal to begin with. So this is one of the reasons I'm very interested in the effect and hearing stories like yours, for example, to find out what the experience is that people have with psychedelics.
Yeah. Well, I have opinions on that matter, but I don't think we should go into that.
Now I'm curious. What are your opinions?
No, yeah, I think it's being kept from the market and being made illegal by big pharma, and because they cannot make any money off of it because it's a natural product which cannot be patented or some things like that.
Right.
Same goes with MDMA, which is a part of the working substance from ecstasy. I have also heard or read that this can also be very helpful in helping people with PTSD, and it's very, very affordable to manufacture and to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might be a very interesting subject for another episode because we're definitely delving into tinfoil hat territory with this.
Yeah. I love that area.
Yeah, this is definitely conspiracy theory territory.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that might be a very interesting one for another time. Let's not delve into that any deeper for now. But all right. Anything else on the psychedelic front that you would like to mention?
Well, if people are interested in reading more about the experiences, I would refer to them to a book called The Teachings of Don Juan, written by Carlos Castaneda, in which Carlos goes to Don Juan, who is a kind of a shaman. He knows these old ways of psychedelics, how to handle it with nature, and he just pretty much journals his entire experience over few years. So that could be a nice addition if you're interested in the subject to gain more knowledge on. It's a real story. It has been happened. It has happened, and it's quite a popular book actually in the shamanic world.
And for everybody who's listening, do you have some other tips for incorporating spirituality and nature into the daily lives of people?
Yeah. I would start with, if you go into nature, maybe to woods or forest near you, just walk slowly, be quiet, smell your surroundings, feel your surroundings, like just pick up a leaf, put it in your hands, smell it. How does it smell? And really experience nature. If you have certain things you would like to have insights on, or you would like to have answers on, you could go out and look around you, see what catches your eye, and make the connection with the thing you are trying to answer. What does, like I previously mentioned, what does this item or this tree or this log or this path mean to you? How does it relate to the question you have? And just start playing with it and answers will come, and listen to your intuition, listen to your gut feeling. Yeah, the answers are all right there. You just need to be quiet, be open, and listen to what nature is offering you. Yeah.
What is next for you, David?
What's next for me? Having dinner with my wife and son. Yeah. No, what's next for me? Yeah, I'm in the process of really professionalizing my coaching business. I have been working on a new concept together with Jos, which we will launch next year. So we will organize a few weekends based on the elements. So water, air, fire, and earth, in which we will go deeper into the shamanic way course, and we will use the elements as a way to approach the weekends, just to gain more insights for people who have already been in the shaman way courses. So that's what we're working on at the moment, and we're hoping to release this probably in February or March next year.
Okay, so like a little bit less than half a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Perfect.
Thanks for sharing your story, David, and teaching me all about shamanism. Like I said in the beginning, it's for me a very new concept. So I'm very happy and thankful to you for walking me through it, how it works, what it includes, what kind of people are generally involved in this, and also knowing the techniques. It has been quite interesting. So thank you very much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor, really. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast, Jeffrey.
It's an absolute pleasure. Take care of yourself, David.
Thank you. You too.
And with that, David Estié has left the conversation. Thank you for listening, and take care.